Wow, Josh said. The inside of the barn had been turned into a night sky. All four walls, the ceiling, and the floor were painted dark blue with bright stars. Planets hung from the ceiling on thin wires. A large white moon had been painted on the back wall. In front of the moon stood cutouts of three astronauts in spacesuits. This is incredible, Dink said. He spun around, trying to take it all in. It's like being in outer space. Alice twisted a dimmer switch on the wall and the lights got brighter. My husband worked for Kennedy Space Center. He and some of his engineer friends built it all in their spare time. What's that? Ruth Rose asked. She was pointing at a 20-foot tall metal contraption leaning against a wall. One side was open, and leather seats were visible. A ladder was attached to one side. That's a small replica of a space shuttle, Alice told her. My husband saw the real ones at Kennedy Space Center. Josh was looking up at a silver tube hanging from the ceiling by cables. It was the same length as the space shuttle. Is that a submarine? He asked Alice. It's a space simulator, Alice said. Barney made that too. It moves forward and backward and rolls from side to side, making you think you're traveling in space with no gravity. I definitely have to try that, Ruth Rose said. How do you get up there? Alice pointed to a switch on the wall. I can lower it, and there are buttons inside to control the thing. Howie's kids loved playing astronaut in it. Why did your husband build all this? Dink asked. Alice smiled. He was a space nut, she said. Always regretted he couldn't go into space, so he started building and collecting stuff. She walked over to a small desk in one corner. This is where Barney wrote in his diary, she said. He also sent letters to scientists, and a lot of them wrote back to him. He kept the letters in a fat folder. Now the folder's gone, along with his diary and pen. She pulled open the desk drawer. It was empty. Why was he writing to scientists? Dink asked. Barney was concerned about the environment, Alice said. He walked this property every day taking notes. He even made trails through the jungle out there. Then he wrote to scientists at NASA and the Space Center with his ideas. How to turn Spanish moss into food for cattle, how to use pond algae for running cars, how to bring in seaweed from the coast to fertilize crops. On the desk was a green blotter stained with ink. A jar of pencils sat on the blotter. Taped to the jar was a sign that said, Barney's Stuff. Josh pulled a shiny pen from the jar. Is this your husband's pen? He asked. Oh my goodness, it is, Alice said. She grabbed the pen and gave Josh a hug. My eyesight. The little sign on the jar caused a thought to pop into Dink's head. Then it popped out again. He closed his eyes, trying to remember something he'd noticed earlier. Dink felt it was important, but he couldn't bring the thought back. Around the huge room were displays of spacesuits and packages of food astronauts ate while in space. Autographed pictures of at least 20 astronauts hung on one wall. Samples of moon rocks were lined up on a shelf. Those really come from the moon? Ruth Rose asked. They sure did, Alice said. Astronaut Neil Armstrong gathered rocks when he walked on the moon. She pointed to one rock. See, he signed this one. What's this? Josh asked. He was standing at a plastic display case. Inside was a strange-looking object shaped like the capital letter H. It was about 4 feet long and sat on a sheet of plywood lying across 2 wooden trestles. Part was cut away to show compartments inside. There are itty-bitty people inside, Josh said. That's my husband's replica of the International Space Station, Alice said. She pointed up. The real one is up in the sky right now, with real astronauts living in it. Josh peered inside the miniature space station. What do astronauts in space eat? He asked. From what I hear, nothing very tasty, Alice said, heading for the door, but you get to have some of my famous cookies. Chapter 5. The kids followed Alice back to the house. They stopped to admire Hannah's motor scooter. It was painted the same blue as a robin's egg. There were 2 side compartments under the rear seat. One was open and held books. The cover of one of the books showed a woman who was an old-timey movie star. The word film was printed in silvery letters beneath the actress's face. The other compartment was closed. Hannah had left the scooter's key in the ignition. The key was on a thin chain holding more keys. I'm getting a scooter like this someday, Josh said. Here's where I'll keep my snacks. He tapped the closed compartment. Get one that holds 3 people, Ruth Rose said. You can drive Dink and me around town. She bent down and plucked a limp flower that was stuck to the front wheel spokes. This flower matches my outfit. They went inside where the kitchen smelled like warm cookies. Wallace and Hannah were sitting at the table drinking lemonade. Ruth Rose put her flower in a small glass of water and set it on the table. Everyone sit, Alice said. She arranged some cookies on a plate and brought it to the table. Help yourselves. Hannah was telling me about the rattlesnake, Wallace said. I would have screamed and dropped the lemonade, too. Not me, Josh said, reaching for a cookie. I love snakes. And snakes love you, Dink added. Everyone laughed and began eating Alice's cookies. Hannah stood up and put her glass in the sink. I'm going to go study with Kenny, she said. She took 2 cookies off the plate and left by the back door. I think Hannah and Kenny are sweethearts, Alice said. They spend a lot of time together. Do they go to the same school? Wallace asked. Alice nodded. They both go to the community college, but I let them study here because it's a lot quieter than their dorm, she said. Hannah wants to be a movie producer. Awesome, Josh said. Maybe she can make a movie of one of your books, Wallace. Lovely idea, Wallace said. Why don't you kids do some exploring before supper? Uncle Barney found some arrowheads in the dirt behind the barn, right, Auntie? He sure did, Alice said. There are shovels in the tool shed behind the cafe, but stay away from the pond. You might want to put on some mosquito repellent, Wallace suggested. I've some in my backpack, Ruth Rose said. Alice stood up. Goodness, it's almost 5 o'clock. She covered the plate of cookies with aluminum foil and handed it to Ruth Rose. Give these to Howie, would you? She said. His kids will be upset if he doesn't bring home some of my cookies. Dink took his glass to the sink and placed it next to Hannah's, glancing at the magnets on the refrigerator door. The alligator's mouth was empty. The note was gone. But he remembered the lost thought that had been bothering him. He opened the drawer in front of him, picked up what was inside, and slipped it into his back pocket. The kids trooped out the back door. Remind me to tell you something later, Dink whispered to Josh and Ruth Rose. In the yard, Bear appeared from around the corner of the house, followed by Howie. Bear ran up to Ruth Rose to sniff what she was carrying. Are those cookies by any chance? Howie asked. Ruth Rose handed over the plate. Auntie Alice said they're for your kids, she said. Can we meet them? Sure, he said. I'll bring Maddie and Seth over tomorrow. They have a school project to do, and I said I'd help them. A space project? Dink asked. Howie shook his head. Nope, it's about animals, he said, walking toward the van. What kind of animals? Josh asked. Think paws and claws, Howie said. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose watched him drive away. Great, Josh muttered. We just missed running into a mountain lion. There are bats in the trees, scorpions in the beds, and alligators in the pond. Snakes are hiding under picnic tables. Dink laughed. But Ruth Rose and I are here to protect you, he said. Guys, if we're going to look for arrowheads, we need to do it before it gets dark, Ruth Rose said. Let's get my mosquito spray. The kids went inside the bunkhouse and sprayed pine shine over their clothes. It smelled like a Christmas tree. Dink tossed Super Science onto his bunk, and then they found shovels and a rake in the tool shed. What did you want to tell us? Josh asked Dink. When I first got here, there was a note on the fridge, Dink told his friends. It said something about buying paper towels and was signed H. I figured Hannah or Howie wrote it to Auntie A. Josh stared at Dink. That's it? He asked. Paper towels? No, Dink said. I'm pretty sure the handwriting was the same as on that postcard Auntie Alice got today. The one from someone wanting to buy her house? Ruth Rose asked. Why would the handwriting be the same? That's what I want to know, Dink said. He showed them the postcard he'd snitched from the kitchen. Couldn't be the same, Josh said. The writer wants to buy the house. The note writer is either Hannah or Howie asking Auntie A to buy paper towels. I could be wrong, Dink said, and the note is gone, so I can't compare them. Anyway, let's look for arrowheads. They walked behind the barn. The algae covering the pond looked thick and slimy. Dink remembered the magazine cover. Was algae the green goo that was going to save the planet? I wonder if there really is an alligator in the pond, Josh said. Don't get too close, guys. Lots of animals come here to drink, Ruth Rose said. Very funny, Bunny, Josh said. Josh, I wasn't trying to be funny, Ruth Rose said. Come look at these tracks. Josh and Dink walked over to where she was standing. There were prints in the dark, wet ground. Most were tiny, like the ones birds or small animals would make, but Dink noticed wide prints with 4 long toes. And we're going to stop there.